there are certain differences when it's a private institution versus a public institution, and that if an applicant is denied, that doesn't mean that they don't belong in medical school. They just might need more time. There might not have been enough spaces or seats, if you will. So I think there are some assumptions about how admissions decisions are made, and I would like to try and break down some of those assumptions to the extent possible and just make it as transparent as we possibly can.
Hello, everyone. We are excited to have another fantastic guest today. We have Miss Dimple Patel, who I'm just going to let you tell us a little bit about yourself and your intersection with medicine.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm Dimple Patel, and I'm the Associate Dean for Admissions here at the University of Minnesota Medical School Twin Cities campus. And I have been in higher education in some form of leadership or another for just over 20 years. And for the last, I would say, almost 15 years, I've been in medical education, specifically doing admissions work at 2 different medical schools. And I've been in my current position for just over 10 years.
Awesome. So I know a lot of students are dying to hear your insights because you're an Associate Dean of Admissions, and we have a lot of pre-med listeners. So what is something that you wish that more students knew about when they applied to medical school? Because of course, each school, like we have the guidelines, we know you're supposed to take certain prerequisites, you're supposed to take the MCAT and things like that. They hear they're supposed to do certain community service and
Right.
shadowing. But what is something that you wish got across when students were applying?
Well, I wish the admissions process in general across all medical schools was just more transparent. And I think we all try to do that as much as possible, but it still seems from an applicant's perspective that it's still behind the scenes and there's not a lot of information about how decisions are made. And I would not want to feel that way as an applicant to anything. I think we should be transparent and we should make this process as accessible as possible. And I know that we're trying to do that, not only at my institution, I believe that we're trying to do that across medical schools, but yet there's still a disconnect between what it is that we do, what it is that we're looking for, and then what the applicant takes away from the information that's out there. So I think for me, I would want to try and help the applicant know the process, that it is holistic, that there are tough decisions to be made, that the pools are really big, and there are certain differences when it's a private institution versus a public institution, and that if an applicant is denied, that doesn't mean that they don't belong in medical school. They just might need more time. There might not have been enough spaces or seats, if you will. So I think there are some assumptions about how admissions decisions are made, and I would like to try and break down some of those assumptions to the extent possible and just make it as transparent as we possibly can.
I love that answer. So with that being said, another one of my questions was, we all know that medical school admissions is quite competitive. So you have thousands of applicants and sometimes your class is less than 100 or less than 200. Right. So how does your team kind of sift through and make those tough decisions as to who to allow to continue?
Right. So it's a great question. And I work for a state institution. We're the only public medical school in the state that we're in the state of Minnesota. And so we do have a commitment to training Minnesota residents. So that will always be our first priority. So it does become pretty challenging just by the numbers for a non-resident to be accepted at our institution. That said, we enroll a class of about 80% Minnesotan and 20% non-resident. And when we're looking at that non-resident pool, we're looking to see what an applicant can contribute to the overall makeup of the class. What unique experiences do they have? Perhaps they have connections to the state or some knowledge about the state and its population of patients that we would hope that many of our graduates end up serving. And so if they mention that, if they talk about that in their application, or if they've built, like I said, some sort of a base here in Minnesota, they will, of course, perhaps be elevated in that non-resident pool. We do review applications altogether, so we don't have a separate pool for non-resident candidates and resident candidates, but our admissions committee has been advised that, if they have non-residents in their review queue for the week, that they should present a unique attribute experience to bring to the overall class makeup. And usually that's a connection to Minnesota, some unique interest in some of the work that we're doing at the medical school, or something related to the population of people that we're trying to serve in Minnesota.
I think that's a great answer. And I've been talking to a lot of people who work in admissions recently, and it kind of seems like it boils down to when you're applying to schools, look and make sure that you're in alignment with the mission of the school and the organization, because it seems like your mission is to train physicians to go and serve the residents of Minnesota, which is phenomenal. So there may be schools who have missions similar to that if they're in the state versus having other missions in terms of research and other things like that. So kind of seeing where you line up and if you meet that criteria, or if you're in alignment with that mission, because you're going to be giving away at least 4 years of your life to serve and to be a part of that community. So you want to make sure that it's a good fit.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely focus in on what the school is about, what their mission is, and what your goals are, and do they come together? Is there a place where they intersect? The mission of the university and the goals that you have as an individual applicant for your medical education and future career. We can train any kind of a future physician at the University of Minnesota. We also have a strong commitment to training individuals who will end up in primary care, will serve rural populations in the state, or who are from and will continue to serve Native and Indigenous communities. So we want to make sure that as an applicant, your interests align with the institution as well. And like I said, I started with that non-resident resident example because it's really clear and helpful for an applicant to just understand by the numbers what it is that we're ending up with in our class.
Absolutely. So as you said, like there's so many phenomenal applicants, and a lot of them, you all kind of check those boxes that you're supposed to check. So of course you're going to have the grades and the test scores and things like that. But what else do you think makes a good applicant that would stand out?
I'm going to do my best to get through this without coughing. I apologize. Somebody that definitely presents strong evidence of the various competencies that we're trying to admit for. So the Association of American Medical Colleges has their core competencies, and then individual medical schools have their unique missions, and those sort of intersect to inform the admissions process at most medical schools. So we're looking for that evidence of service orientation. We're looking for that evidence of critical thinking and sociocultural humility. So when you're going through your application as an applicant, what have you done in terms of your experiences, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, to present evidence for those various competencies that I mentioned earlier? And those experiences should be broad and diverse. I'm trying to move our process away from looking at how much a student has done or an applicant has done, and really looking at what has the applicant taken away from the particular experiences. What are the learning outcomes? And so when you're preparing your application, write your application in that way. Don't just list out in bullet point format, this is what I did, this is where I did it, but how did your behavior perhaps change from the experience? What did you know before you went into the experience? What did you believe? And then if your beliefs or if your knowledge changed through the experience, then talk about that as well, because that's really going to help us understand your learning process, what you're committed to, and the fact that you value a changed behavior in yourself, because that's what we're looking for as well. So presenting your application in a way that tells an admissions committee what you've learned throughout the different experiences you've had, I think is really important, and probably something that isn't as focused on in preparation as sort of just compared to like listing out all of your experiences and what it is that you've done. So those learning outcomes are really important.
That is quite important. As you mentioned earlier, there will be some people who may be waitlisted or who may not gain admittance during this application cycle. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think if you have been denied before an interview, so that means you have not been offered an interview at an institution, it's important to think a little bit about what kind of an applicant you are in respect to the mission. So if you're a non-resident application at an institution like ours and you were denied an interview, that likely had to do with the fact, again, more so that we have a commitment to Minnesota residents, right? And that you just did not meet that Minnesota non-resident marker that we expect non-residents to have. Perhaps it had something to do with your metrics. I find very few applications in the total applicant pool that don't have the experiences that most medical schools are looking for that inform the evidence of competency that I was talking about. Most individuals who end up putting an application forward have done a wide variety of things outside of the classroom and in the classroom to inform those competencies. So then if you have been denied after an interview, right, whether you're a resident or non-resident, then you really have to reflect back on your interview experience because that's a huge part of the application process. So how did you interview? What kinds of questions were you asked and how did you present your responses? There are traditional interviews, MMIs. Did you have some time to practice with some different people to give you feedback prior to the interview? And then I would say some of the similar things that I had said about being rejected before the interview apply as well. So for us, for example, when we're building a class, again, I can't reiterate it enough about that commitment to Minnesota residents. But then also, if you're a non-resident, you're competing with a really large pool of applicants post-interview, just like you did pre-interview. So we want to see those exceptional qualities and experiences in those non-resident candidates. And that could be, this is for everybody, but, especially in our pool, we're looking, for your research experience. What have you done? Have you published or presented? Again, how have you prepared your application to show the admissions committee that you have learned something from a particular experience? Simply putting in a bit of time in a particular experience no longer is enough. We really need to see some substantive time spent and learning outcomes presented. We also want to make sure that all applicants really understand how to navigate difference and working with people that are different from them or serving patients that are different from themselves. Do you have the ability to be open-minded and inclusive? That's really important to us. And then I would say the last thing is making sure that you have evidence in your application of overcoming challenges in your life. So have you put yourself in a situation where your values were questioned and stretched and challenged and where you were able to grow, within that space and learn something different and really hear somebody else's experience compared to yours? And then again, how did you present that in your interview or in your application?
Absolutely. I think that that's great advice. And it showcases for those people who may be waitlisted or may need to give it another shot for another round. It's not uncommon that there are things that you can look at in order to make your application a better package or apply to schools that may be more in alignment with your goals and with their mission.
Yep.
My final question to you is one of my favorites. I love asking it to all my guests because everyone has had a touch point with the U.S. healthcare system at some point. And we all know that it's absolutely perfect and doesn't need any changes. If you had a magic wand, what is one thing that you would change about the healthcare system?
I wish it was easier to navigate. And I'm speaking from, admittedly, I'm speaking from a place of privilege for various reasons. And if I find it challenging to navigate the system as a speaker of the English language, as somebody who has the ability to network and have the time to navigate the system, then I really worry about individuals who don't have the time or don't have the network or don't have the language. How do they get through? It's incredible to me, the challenges that I have faced, and I faced very little. My touch points with the healthcare system have been somewhat limited over the course of my life, but the times of late, I'm struck by the miscommunication that happens or the disconnect between what it is that I'm told I should be doing and what it is that I have access to be able to do. And so every time I'm in that situation, I think about somebody who doesn't have the time to spend on understanding what it is that needs to get done, and somebody who doesn't have the language ability. So where English might be their second language, or they're working through an interpreter, where do they find the time and the resources to really navigate what I think is a pretty complicated system when it comes to communication, both the patient's ability to communicate and the provider's ability to communicate back to the patient?
You definitely struck a chord and you're speaking my language. I think I don't know if we have enough time to chat about this, because I am a primary care doctor, and in my background, I worked at a federally qualified health center where 50% of my patients were non-English speaking or undocumented and uninsured. And there were so many instances where things may have progressed further than they would have if they had the resources, the time, everything in alignment to get the care that they need. So physicians train so hard, and we're able to say, like, okay, we know what you have. This is how you treat it. Let's go do it. But when you have those barriers where you can't just go and do it, it's not that simple, and you have to figure out ways to maneuver the system, which there shouldn't be barriers. And even on top of that, on a more personal note, what you're saying about the difficulty with navigating the system. Recently, my cousin, she is 30, and about 2 weeks ago, she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and she does not speak. So it's been an interesting few weeks of navigating the system as a physician who's been a physician for over a decade and knows different things, but from this aspect of having someone say she has Medicaid. When she was diagnosed, they just told her her diagnosis and sent her home because she didn't have the insurance in the state that they said. So they said, go figure it out. So how many people have institutions like this just said, figure it out? And when I called them with her on the phone, the assistant, I asked to speak to the physician. I told them I was a physician. They said, oh, they're not going to call you back. They haven't, and it's been 2 weeks. And I just asked them, like, if this was your family member, even if you can't, I understand the financial things, we'll figure that out, but at least try to help give resources and connect to another doctor. So thankfully, we have gotten her into a great system with oncologists, and everyone's wonderful. But there have been just different barriers of how to get in with a primary care doctor and how to figure out how to get in with this oncologist who I was able to call and get in with the week. But what about those people who don't have family members or physicians? So we have to sit and we have to think back, especially those who are in training, who are listening to this, or who will be in training. You're writing your statements and you're thinking about your why. And most of you guys are saying, I hate to say it, the generic, I want to help people. And we know we have these conversations about dig deeper into why you want to help people, because there's
be specific, right? But I'm not going to be applying to medical school ever, but I have thought about that. And I have thought, especially recently, I've had a few more interactions than usual with the healthcare system. And I have thought that, if I were to respond to that AMCAS prompt for your personal statement, why medicine, I would talk about wanting to contribute to bettering communication. I've had just some unique and very interesting experiences where I've been forced to think about more of the privilege that I have, and thankfully spend time thinking more about what certain individuals that are very near and dear to me don't have, family members, community members. And time and communication, time is so precious, and there's so little of it in a day. If you're a parent or a caretaker and you're working and you have community responsibilities and responsibilities to your faith community, and you have all of these things going on, where do you fit in the time to just pick up the phone and make an appointment with the referral that you've been given, right? Where do you find time in your day to be able to do that? And so, that's what I would write about. And so think deeply about why you want to go into medicine. And to your point, sure, yes, you want to help people, like you said, but specifically how? Do you want a better communication? Do you want to better access? Do you want to create, networks where people that have multiple providers are all talking to? These are things that I know people are thinking about. And I know that most everyone has really good intentions in this field, specifically with the population that we work with and that you're a part of. something is amiss when it comes to communication, for sure.
Absolutely. And for the listeners out there, like, I know I went off of my rant, but the purpose of is kind of living your why and even revisiting it in your different stages. So you may be a pre-med who is working to get into medical school. And once you're in there, eventually you'll get to the phase where you're applying to residency and fellowship and so on. So sometimes it may take a little bit, even when you're down or you may not have done your best on a test or something, reading what your why is and kind of reevaluating that and seeing if there are some things you want to have opportunities to grow from. So it's very important. So we have our whys, we get in there, but once you're a physician, don't forget about why you're there, because there's some patients who need you and who just are seeking care. And although the days may get long and you may be stressed and you may have a billion patients in a day, one of my mentors in healthcare told me one day, like, you may have 25 patients on your list today, but they usually only have this one doctor's visit.
That's right.
So make it about them while you're treating them.
Most definitely. Yeah.
I appreciate having this wonderful conversation with you today. And I'll just give you an opportunity to tell our listeners goodbye.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me to talk with you today. And to all the listeners, please reach out should you have questions or comments. And I wish you all the best. I know this is a really long and challenging journey, but hopefully you will embrace some of those challenges and be able to reflect on them and grow from them. And the journey continues. So certainly it's about getting into medical school, but you have a lifetime meaningful career ahead of you. And I applaud you for attempting to do what it is that you're doing, but stay the course. And I think this is a very used sort of saying, but it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So stick with it and seek out the best sources of support for yourself and think about yourself and your needs while you're thinking about serving and being in service to others. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely. So it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. For all of the listeners out there, feel free to check us out wherever podcasts are found. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can check us out on Med School Coach. And if you have any requests for any guests or topics, you can reach out to me at Dr. D Graham, DOCTOR, the letter DGRAM on Instagram, or Med School Coach's Instagram at Med School Coach, and we'll feel free to hear from you. See you guys next week with another fantastic guest. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward medical school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.